Hello and welcome to Canvey Wick. My name is Jo and I'm the Buglife Community Warden here at this amazing site. If you haven't been before, it is a site of special scientific interest and it is a brownfield site, which means it was an industrial site. It was built to be an oil refinery that was never actually functioning. This was decades ago, and since then it's been taken over by invertebrates and is an absolute haven for wildlife. It is managed by the RSPB and the site is actually owned by the Land Trust, and Buglife are advising on the site because it has so many fabulous invertebrates, which we love. So today we're going to take you on a virtual walk around the nature reserve. There are two reasons. The first one is for National Storytelling Week. So we want to be able to celebrate some of the stories associated with the site and the folklore, myth and legend related to some of the invertebrates and plant species that we will see on the way. The second one is to make the site more accessible. Not everyone's able to get out and get around the site, and so we want to share how fabulous it is with those that can't actually get there. Today, first Bugcast is going to be sharing the audio journey through the nature reserve, but keep your eyes peeled because there will be a video coming to accompany this session. So that's a little bit about why we're here. So the first point is we're in the car park. So you come along to Northwick Road, you park in the car park and you see this beautiful dragonfly sculpture. The dragonfly sculpture was made for the opening of the nature reserve back in 2014, and it's made with some of the industrial materials that were left behind when the site was abandoned. So if you look closely, you'd be able to see that the body is made from an old lamppost that was taken from the site. Oh, I can just see Kaitlyn on her way over. So we're going to meet Kaitlyn, who is our folklore sage from Buglife, and she's going to help us on our journey by sharing some of her knowledge about the plants. Hi, Kaitlyn, how are you?
Hi, Jo. Fancy seeing you here. Hi, everybody. Glad to see you on this journey with us today around Canvey. I'm Kaitlyn Alverson. I'm Engagement Officer with Buglife. I started with the charity in 2021 as a conservation intern on the 7 Beelines project. And now I have the pleasure of delivering a lot of outreach activities for Buglife, like events, school sessions, talks, walks, stalls, pretty much anything to do with outreach and engagement. But a particular passion of mine is nature connection and folklore, which leads us nicely into the topic for today. Folklore itself is made up of the word folk and lore, which respectively mean people and traditions or stories. Folklore means the traditions passed down, usually by word of mouth, over generations to bring us the stories we know and love today. Folklore often has ties to the natural world, referring to ancient beliefs, meanings or uses of plant and animal life. So, during this guided walk today, I'm going to share some amazing lore of the flora and fauna present at Canvey Wick, which leads us quite nicely into the topic for today, doesn't it, Jo?
Excellent, it does indeed. So I wonder then, seeing as we're stood under this amazing dragonfly sculpture, is there any folklore or myth or legend related to dragonflies at all?
You know, there is. The dragonfly is a great start to our walk today. In some cultures, they symbolise good luck, prosperity, and quite similar to butterflies, it's thought that if you help one out, you can make a wish and the dragonfly will grant it. So maybe next time you're out and about and you see a dragonfly in a pickle, maybe you give it a hand, you might even get something out of it yourself. In European countries, the dragonfly bears significant relations to Freya, the Norse goddess of love, fertility, and warfare, which to her, they are quite sacred. In ancient Norse lore, dragonflies represent insight, transformation, and adaptation, and it's thought that the sight of a pair mating, making a heart shape, is the origin of the modern symbol of love. Isn't that a sweet start to our walk?
Ooh, very nice. We do see a lot of dragonflies on site here over the summer months, and certainly down by the pond area and along some of the ditches as well. So it is a good time to come and spot them. I haven't seen them in the heart form here at Canvey Wick, but I have seen that elsewhere. So I'll be keeping my eyes open for that for sure. So then, Kaitlyn, should we start our little walk, do you think?
Lead the way, Jo.
Okay, so first off then, we'll go through the kissing gate. And as we go through the kissing gate, you'll see that we're going through what I refer to as Berry Alley. So this is an area where we have shrubs and hedgerows all along the side lining the path. We have quite a lot of what we call common native species. We have blackthorn, hawthorn, bramble. So again, lots of berries, lots of things that we like to come and pick. And certainly in August and September, there's a lot of blackberries going on. There's also all the sloes for gin and just general kind of snacks for birds and invertebrates and everybody really. So everyone's feasting along Berry Alley. So again, I wondered if there might be anything that you could share with us about some of our common hedgerow plants.
There's quite a lot to share about these two, actually. Hawthorn and blackthorn are actually two of my favourite trees or hedgerow plants because of their folklore. I'm afraid both do have some more sinister stories linked to them, blackthorn more so, but they are truly two beautiful plants. Hawthorn is a small tree in the rose family with a gorgeous blossom which blooms in May. It's linked closely to the pagan celebration of Beltane. It's also said to be a friendly tree that loves people and acts as a guardian of sacred wells and springs. It blooms in spring as a symbol of sacrifice and protection, but to bring its white flowers inside is unlucky and would bring death. And it kind of goes for the same for all white flowers in folklore, really. Plus, the flowers of the hawthorn contain the same chemical that's present in decaying animals, so it would quite literally smell of rotting flesh if you brought them into the house. One of the legends linked to the hawthorn is that of Joseph of Arimathea, who had journeyed to Glastonbury and placed his staff in the ground, which then grew into a beautiful hawthorn tree. Now it's classed as the Glastonbury hawthorn, which is supposedly meant to bloom at different times of the year to all the other hawthorns in the area. Blackthorn, on the other hand, is one of the most foraged plants in the UK, especially for gin lovers. It's considered a lucky plant, but more commonly known as the witch's tree with a grim reputation, which is exacerbated by fairy tales like Sleeping Beauty, where a blackthorn thicket prevents the prince from getting to Sleeping Beauty, and Rapunzel, where the prince is blinded by the sharp thorns that are often associated with blackthorn. It's closely tied with witches, which are thought to use slows in their magic, and injuries caused by their thorns, the blackthorn, could go septic, increasing its awful reputation. But even with their prickly nature and a history of distrust around it, they're considered a tree of protection. So I quite like to think that it's standing proud as guardian of Canvey Wick today.
So if we carry on then down the path, we end up at the junction. So at the junction, there is a signpost which points you back towards the car park or on towards the nature reserve and the bee trail. This junction is marked by a willow. So when you're at the willow, you can either take a left or a right turn. If you go to the left, you'll be going into the nature reserve, which is a route that we're going to be following, and we're going to be following around the bee trail and the orchid trail. But I do want to mention if you turn right. So at the moment, if you turn right, there is a gate, and the gates are there blocking the path. However, there has been a hole cut, so it is possible to climb through them. And that is into an area that isn't part of the actual open to the public nature reserve. So when the main reserve opened in 2014, a lot of work had been done to get the site up to scratch. So to make sure that the areas were open and the habitat had been cleared, and we'd put benches in and we'd waymarked the trail so that people can see where the bee trail is to find the bees that are on site and to find the orchids. That hasn't been done if you turn to the right. That area was still being left to nature. It was only in 2022 that the RSPB took on the management of that additional area of land. So a lot of what we've been doing recently, if you've been to Canvey Wick at all and you've seen activity on site, has been the habitat restoration works. So this is a much bigger section. This area is 74 hectares, whereas the existing nature reserve is 19 hectares. It's a much bigger area, and it's divided into 7 compartments as we know it, because it has a road network. So whereas I mentioned earlier that the site was designed to be an oil refinery, when they put the Thames dredgings down onto the marshland to make it able to build the foundations, they put all of the dredgings down, so they added material which made it really sandy and well draining, which is why we have very different environment to the surrounding marshes that are nearby. But they also put a road network in to be able to access the different buildings that were there and the storage areas. So that's really handy for us, because normally on a site of special scientific interest, you wouldn't be allowed to build. But because we already have that road network, it means it makes it more accessible for visitors so that you can come and visit and you can come and follow those paths. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be going into the nature reserve. But I just wanted to mention that there is work going on in that extension land, and we are 2 years into that project. We've got another year to go. And once all the work has been done, then people will be able to come in and see that and see the work that we're doing to clear some of the shrub away and to make space and habitats for the invertebrates. That is one of the areas that birders love to go to, because we have nightingales that nest there. And last year we were up to 13 nesting pairs. So although we're doing habitat management work for invertebrates, we are still making sure that we are looking after the site for the birds that are using it as well. So we are at the junction with the Willow. We have the Willow on one side and the signpost on the other. So again, Kaitlyn, is there anything that you can tell us about willows?
There certainly is, Jo. Willow is my absolute favourite tree of them all, I would have to say. It's just such a beautiful tree with its weeping boughs, and I always find them quite dramatic and just amazing to see whenever you come across one. Willow is seen in folklore as the tree of enchantment, which is said to glow in the moonlight with fairies sitting on its branches all the time. So maybe if you do come across a willow at night time, you might see some of these little fairy creatures flying around the tree. It's a very feminine tree, often associated with witches, wise women and healers with strong connections to the element of water and the moon, who's also said to be a strong feminine goddess. The branches could be used to make baskets, fences, and willow weaving is still a very popular activity today. Its bark could be used to tan leather as well as a painkiller. The bark actually contains salicylic acid, which is commonly found in medications like aspirin today. You could tie a knot in the branch of a willow, and if it didn't break, you could make a wish. If the wish was granted, you'd bring it back to the tree, untie the knot and thank the tree for its help, supposedly knocking on the wood. And that's where the famous saying, to knock on wood, comes from, symbolising the luck of the willow tree itself too. The willow stands as a symbol of love and happiness, but by the 16th and 17th centuries, it was associated with loss and grief, and since it had been traditionally planted in churchyards. In Irish folklore, supposedly, if you were found walking alone at night, a weary traveller, the willow would uproot itself and follow you home. Not quite sure what it would do if it found you, but it's still a scary story nonetheless. But the genus certainly deserves better than these more grim associations. It's a beautiful tree that you can unburden yourself to, but any secrets told under the tree might not be kept and likely passed around on the wind. So to avoid any of our secrets being told to the whole of Canvey, I think it's best we swiftly move on, Jo.
Indeed. So we'll follow along on the bee trail then, and we'll start to head down towards the seawall. The lovely straight path. You can see the water ahead of you. And as we walk down, there is a nice little bench here where we can just stop for a moment and just take in the sights. And opposite us is a lovely broom. And when this is in flower in the summer, not only does it have beautiful colour and beautiful fragrance, but this bench is a perfect place to sit and watch all the pollinators that come by. So the bees and the butterflies. So while we're sat here enjoying a little rest, is there anything that you can tell us about the broom, Kaitlyn? Is there anything related to that?
Yes, well, broom is another plant that has some strong ties to witchcraft. It's a very handy plant too, medicinally. Traditionally, the green tips of the flowering branches were used as a mild diuretic, and a concoction made from the young branches or seeds can cause vomiting, for all those times that you need to vomit. Oil from the stems can relieve toothache and clear the skin of parasites, and ashes of the broom were used to treat dropsy, which today is often called an edema or an edema. Broom can help treat gout, sciatica, joint pain, malaria, fever, and kidney stones. So quite a handy little plant to have. The main medicinal ingredient in broom, though, is spartine. Today, spartine is used for heart and circulatory disorders, but when consumed in large doses, it can actually cause excitability and hallucinations. This has been speculated as the reason broom is associated with the traditional picture of witches flying around on brooms and broomsticks. There are other traditional uses of broom as well. It's used in spells for magic, for purification and protection. It's linked to Hecate, sometimes known as the triple goddess or the goddess of witches. She's commonly invoked when you need strong protection, and also normally at the time of Halloween, or more traditionally, Samhain, which ties nicely with broom as it's used at the same time of year to help mark the pagan and Celtic year's end.
Okay then, so perhaps we should get up off of our little bench from having our rest. And if we take a turn here, we're going to turn to the left again, and we're going to follow the path along. So as we follow along here, we're next to some of the ditches. So as I mentioned earlier, the site had Thames dredgings put down to be able to take the foundations because it was grazing marsh before, but they also built ditches into the site. So there is a network of ditches to allow drainage as well as the pathways that we're following. And a lot of the ditches run next to the pathway. And again, they are great habitats because we have reed beds in them. We've got reeds coming up. And the reeds that we have here, even though at the moment there's not a lot in bloom at Canvey Wick, you can see the cigar galls on the reeds. And these are one of my favourite little kind of stories around nature, because in one little gall so much happens. So basically there is a fruit fly that lays its eggs in the common reed stem. And what happens is it makes the gall appear. It changes the way that the reed grows. And so this gall appears. And so the larvae then munches away and eats within inside that space and then emerges if it survives that long, because they can get eaten by blue tits and harvest mice and other things as well. So they provide food. But if they do make it to adulthood and then leave, there's an empty hole in the gall. So that then gets used by other creatures. So we have a reed yellow-faced bee, and that little bee will create chambers and lay its eggs within the gall. So the gall kind of gets recycled. So it gets used by the bee, but it can also be used by a parasitic wasp as well, that comes along when the larvae is in there, lays its eggs in the larvae, which will then munch away on the larvae and then emerge from the gall. So this one little gall that you could very easily walk past without noticing has a whole story of things that could be going on inside. So I thought that was a fabulous thing to talk about with National Storytelling Week, and being the idea of joyful celebration of the power of sharing stories. So on the off chance that there might be some lore or some legends or myths associated with reeds, is there anything that you can share with us about that then, Kaitlyn?
I can. Reeds appear to have a kind of a bad reputation in folklore. In Celtic mythology, reeds represent evil and are often associated with spirits and death. However, they also represent music, wisdom, scholarship, and protection due to their associations with Druidic writing, music, and the goddess Bridget. On the Celtic tree calendar, the reed, like the broom, also represents the time of Samhain. Marking the beginning of the Celtic year, Samhain is a time when the door to the other world is the weakest, allowing the souls of the dead to join the living for a short time. The Celts believed that the whispering sound caused by the wind whipping through the reeds was actually the souls of their ancestors, whispering to them from the afterlife. Reeds also symbolically mark the border between water and land, and are a well-respected and revered border, denoting the doorway between worlds. The reed and broom is also associated with Bridget, the goddess of poetry, springs, and wells. Bridget's cross, an important Celtic symbol that is still used today, is often woven from reeds and hung inside homes for protection against evil spirits.
Very interesting. It's so easy just to walk past reeds and think, oh, there's just a pile of reeds and nothing happening. Yet there's so much lore associated with it, but also there could be a lot going on. We do know a lot of creatures overwinter in the reed. And as we're approaching nesting season as well, we do get a lot of birds in our reed beds as well. So we get the reed buntings, reed warblers, Chetty's warbler, and we also see marsh harriers around in Canvey Wick as well from time to time. It's always very exciting when we get to see one of those. And interesting that you mentioned that it is an area between the land and the water, because along by the ditches we have banks, and this particular bank that we're walking along here by the reeds, in the summer, when the flowers are in full bloom, this is where we see a lot of our bees, which is why it's a key part of our bee trail. And here at Canvey Wick, we have a very important bee. We have the shrill carder bee. So it's called the shrill carder bee because it has a very loud pitched buzz. So it's quite easy to hear it coming. But it very much likes the plants that we have along here. We have a lot of everlasting pea, and it seems to be one of their favourite plants for feeding on. So obviously we're doing work to make sure that we can maintain the levels of vegetation cover and nectar resources for that particular species of carder bee, which is a biodiversity action plan. And so that means it's targeted by the UK to make sure that we look after it, because there's only a couple of places left in the UK that have good populations of it. But it also has a relation, the brown-banded carder bee that we also have on site. And we also have a lot of other bees as well. We mentioned earlier about the yellow-faced bee that is associated with the galls. And we have a whole array of bees that can be found across our site as well, some of which are rare, some of which are more common. But if you do come in the summer, it's a great place to come to just see all the bees around and the butterflies and the other pollinators just flying along this bank. Not a lot for us to see today on a cold, chilly day. But if you came at a different time of year, it's amazing to see how Canvey Wick changes every time you're here. Anyway, we'll move a little bit further along, because when we get to the end of this section, we're turning left. We're kind of going round in a square, and that takes us into an area that we refer to as the sandy mound. So there was a big mound here that was created so that we have south-facing areas for a lot of our invertebrates to burrow into. They can burrow into that sand and make little nests. But also it's somewhere where they can stay warm as well. So we have the sandy mound area here, and we also have a lovely big open space, which again in the summer is one of our fantastic meadows. We see a lot of other species here as well as all the invertebrates. We see adders here, and we have seen lizards in the area and stuff as well. So it is a veritable array of wildlife that we get in the area. Okay, and so from this sandy mound, again, you can see if we look ahead, we have a corridor. So we have trees that are growing up, the birch, that are bearing over and creating a corridor. So I kind of think of it as a little bit Sleepy Hollow, and I kind of imagine Ichabod Crane riding through it. But anyway, it is an area that's damp because of that, because it has that cover. It is an area that stays quite damp. So at this time of year, it can get a little bit muddy, but it is where we see a lot of our orchids. So as part of the bee trail leading into the orchid trail, this is an area that, because of the dampness, we get orchids here. They are seen on other parts of the site as well. We have a variety of orchids. We have the pyramidal orchid, the common spotted orchid. We have seen ladies' tresses, which is a tiny little orchid, which is the last one to flower. But we also have the bee orchid on site, which I was very excited to see for the first time last year. So that was fantastic. But this is an area where you can generally see the orchids. So again, I'm pretty sure from what I've seen before that orchids have some interesting stories to go with them. Is that correct, Kaitlyn?
Yes, orchids had some rather spicy lore attributed to them. So the name itself is derived from the Greek or Latin word orchis, which translates to testicle. It's said to represent the nodules that you get on the root-like structures of an orchid plant. To add to this sexy depiction, orchids have commonly been used around the world in rituals to improve fertility or virility, that all around symbolise beauty, elegance, love, sexuality, luxury and wealth, and also uniqueness. To add even more drama to the lore of orchids, we must mention the Greeks, who loved orchids. They associated Aphrodite, their goddess of love, with the orchid, so there's already some major respect here for the flower. In one Greek myth, a character named Orchis, where the name might come from, was the son of a satyr and a nymph. While partying one evening during a feast on Bacchus, Orchis, having had a little bit too much wine to drink, tried to force himself on a priestess. Not a good look for Orchis here, and the normally jovial Bacchus was not pleased with this behaviour, as you might imagine. So he had Orchis ripped to shreds by wild beasts and his pieces thrown far and wide. Yet wherever those pieces landed, an orchid flower grew. And in other versions of the story, it's slightly less graphic and gruesome, and Bacchus simply turned Orchis into a flower instead.
Well, so now that we've come down that corridor where the orchids are found, we are kind of on our way back towards the car park. So that brings us back to where we started. We are now back by the post with the car park in one direction and the bee trail that we've just covered. So it's just a simple walk now back down Berry Alley, and we'll be back at the dragonfly sculpture and back to the car park. So I do very much hope that you've enjoyed our virtual walk and storytelling day today around Canvey Wick. Thank you very much to Kaitlyn for sharing all of her knowledge with us. And if you'd like to find out more about what's going on at Canvey Wick, we do have a Canvey Wick community Facebook page, which tells you all about the things that we are doing. We have a walking group, we run courses, we do things in the school holidays, so you can have a look at that. Or you can, alternatively, you can just look at the Buglife website, and we have a Canvey Wick page on there as well. Do keep your eyes open for the footage that's going to be coming, so that you can see, as well as hear, the story and the route that we're travelling on. And hopefully we'll get to update this as well, so that you can see it at different times of year. But big thank you for listening, and a very, very big thank you to Kaitlyn for joining us today.